Hello everybody, so thank you for tuning in today for a really exciting special session of LinkedIn Live. So today, as I said, I am very lucky to be joined by two very special guests all the way from Silicon Valley who are here with us in Dubai, where we'll be talking about the ecosystem around innovation and what learnings are there to be had. We want to talk about real life cases, and I think I can't really have wished for two better people to have joined me here, where I hope you find some value. As always, we welcome your questions, so please jump in and ask us anything along the way and we will get round to them. So first of all, let me pass you over to Hiba Sharif, who is the CEO of Elevoro. So I would like her to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her company.
Thanks, Saika. Thanks for having me. Again, in town in Dubai for just 5 days, but just blessed to be in your company again. And Hiba Sharif, again, based in Silicon Valley in San Jose, California. I have been in finance and in technology for kind of the majority of my career. So fintech is really my forte. In my last role, I was leading information technology, cybersecurity teams for a fintech in Silicon Valley. Have had a long history in consulting and just living around the world and working around the world. I've been quite fortunate. Originally from Sudan and Lebanon, born in Qatar, lived in more than 20 countries around the world, and was fortunate enough to have a U.S. education, but also work across the globe. So very excited to start doing kind of cross-border and global business again as CEO of Elevoro. So Elevoro is a management and technology consulting company. We help startups, investors, and mid-sized companies, really is our primary focus, kind of move from kind of seed all the way through to IPO. So that's one of our biggest fortes, and what excites me about the region is all the transformation that's happening, the ecosystem, though I don't like to use that word, the value system that we need to then create between the startup community, the public sector, the private sector, the VC value chain, and the value system. Again, I like my terminology, and just so much change is happening, and just the right time, I think, to be in the region. So.
Well, we look forward to hearing from you, Hiba, during the show, and we're going to go deep into some of the points. So we'll look forward to your thoughts, especially living in so many countries and working. I think you're going to have quite a good perspective on some of this. And then that passed me on to Dow Jensen. So if you could introduce yourself to our lovely viewers.
Thank you, Saika. Thank you for having me here. This is actually my first time in Dubai, and thank you for having us here. I'm a true Midwesterner from Minnesota, but living in Silicon Valley now for 14 years. Our company, Kaizen Technology Partners, is a reseller and distributor for the public cloud companies like Azure, Amazon, and Google Compute. We help clients design, architect, implement and manage service their cloud environments from beginning to end, and even help them build products. I'm a mother of four, a single mother of four who bootstrapped her company from 0 to 15 million in the last 5 years. And we were, thank you, Fortune Inc. 5000 winner the last 3 years in a row, and have grown tremendously just through the support of our clients and our partners. Thank you for having us again.
You're welcome. So I think definitely two amazing women either side, and I think there is a lot of talk about how women are really breaking waves, and I love hearing the dual roles of also raising a family and also kicking it at a company. So amazing achievements. So let's start off with some of the discussions that we were having earlier. Really was how do you grow, right? So how did you grow your company? So if I talk to you, Hiba, about at what point, like when you're starting from scratch, right? So a lot of people out there who are tuned in, maybe entrepreneurs, maybe new entrepreneurs, you got to start somewhere. So how did you identify where you were going to grow and how you were going to grow?
Yeah, so it's a difficult decision of where to start even, and where do you want to go. You have to really understand. So one is it's very. So if it's a product company, that's a very different decision than if you're a services organization like mine, or a reseller like Dow's. So it first starts by understanding what is it that you want to accomplish. What are you trying to achieve? Where do you start? In terms of growth from there, so I'm in Silicon Valley. That's obviously a really great place to start. Not necessarily a place where most of my business is. So though I'm a Silicon Valley company, the majority of my work is national, is international because of what I'm trying to accomplish in terms of creating that value system between the startups, the VCs, and so on. I started in Silicon Valley, and I started growing because of opportunities to partner. And through those partnerships, if it's partnerships with Kaizen Technology Partners, if it's partnerships with companies like Searchy or companies like Okudo in the region here, those partnerships create the opportunity to grow because you are kind of having to have a local presence wherever those partners are. So that's one way. The second is, from my perspective, having been in all of these areas, have an understanding of the difference between a New York New York City type of environment and what their needs are, which is very different, and their behaviors, their attitudes, their ways of thinking, their ways of working. I mean, it's banking in New York is far more formal than the fintech space in Silicon Valley, where you actually look formal if you're wearing jeans without rips and shirts without holes. So it's a very it depends as well on the culture in which you thrive, and so lots of decisions. I can't really say that it's all necessarily planned out. I know that my specific international plan is very clear. Plus or minus a few countries, but I'm in the process because what I'm doing is unless I can have local presence in the market, as well as that possibly presence in
Yeah, and we're talking really about the learning from Silicon Valley and what the Middle East can learn from that. So I think this fits quite nicely with your growth plans as well, because you have your background, you're coming from a place of expertise, right? And then what pieces of that can be tailored to the Middle East, which again we'll go into further down the line. But yeah, I think that's a good place to start. We're not someone who's brand new. And Dow, over to you in terms of your how you built your amazing business.
I think it really starts from all the relationships you've had in the past decade or two in your career. We really focused and decided that we needed to have brands and logos and have some large clients that we could reference to our other clients. Because I think as a startup, it's really important for you to be able to talk about your capabilities. So do we just stop? Are we being recorded? Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, Dow.
No, but okay.
So you were mentioning
No
about the logos. It's really important.
Yes, it's very important to have some key clients, anchors, that you can use when you come into new clients and talk about who am I, who is Kaizen Technology Partners, who is Elavora, who is Searchy, right? We're new brands and new names to our big client base, and in order to have growth, You need to be able to, even though they might not be your most profitable clients, they are important for you to be able to have clients recognize the people you're associated with and the companies you're associated with, as well as the partners you're associated with. So Amazon Web Services was a huge association for us, and our levels of skill sets in order to be able to have our clients say, oh, they're a platinum partner or they're an advanced partner and they have these competencies, and that's why Amazon wants to work with us. So I think it's important from a relationship standpoint that you use your past relationships to help you grow. Your past partnerships is you build the trust anywhere you are. I think it's all about people. And then these brands that you may have to be able to reference help you skyrocket into as many doors to open first. It's still your job to close and show value to your clients and your prospects, but I think having those anchors is very important in the beginning.
Some great advice there, and I think we were talking about this earlier as well in terms of with a new business, it's like, where do you start? Because you can't go all over the world, and that's something that I think a lot of entrepreneurs do make the mistake of. So start on your doorstep, start in your home country, try, and we were talking about some of the smaller areas like the UAE and Bahrain, how they're perfect test areas, right? And then grow from there. And if you're dealing with international clients, this is where doors will naturally open, but it's up to you to really seize the opportunities and make sure that you bring your product or service there. So let's talk a little bit about the pains, because it's not all easy, as we know, even though you two both make it look like it's super easy. But let's talk about some of the challenges. What have been some of the pains along the way?
Yeah, I would say that there are lots of learnings. I mean, even within the first month or two, right? We spoke about this briefly. Talent is always a critical part of all this, right? And identifying top talent. Now, we're in the business of talent from a services delivery standpoint, right? And if we don't know how to identify talent, that's a problem for our service, because that's the service we deliver. The intangible service there. So sometimes you find extremely talented people, subject matter experts, with the depth of expertise that you need and the right personality, demeanor, and so on. But then it doesn't work as a team, right? So the cultural fit, I'm trying to build a very specific culture within World, and sometimes folks that come from large corporate don't know how to adapt to startups. And I'm not saying we're all about cutting corners or anything like that. By no means am I anyone that doesn't do the structured kind of process oriented stuff. But the ability to adapt, to pivot, right, is very critical. And so when you have a talent challenge, I think that's the biggest pain point that we can have. Is the other one better? Should we try to hold this one?
This is all very much live, so unfortunately we're having some mic issues today.
No, it's just that it literally fell. You can put it somewhere that it stays, like something like this. Yeah.
Perfect. Sorry for that, everybody. Like I said, it's all the beauty of live, just in case anyone wanted some proof if it's pre-recorded or not.
Proof is in the pudding.
So we're just trying to fix our mic issues, so hopefully people can hear us better. Let's see. Better? Yeah, Mohammed, can you hear us? You said that there was not a clear voice. Now, is it better? Hear us?
Okay.
Yeah, let's continue.
Okay.
So talent, you were saying that.
Talent. So what I was saying is, what's important is to be able to make those decisions when you do face a pain point related to talent. Again, you might have the most talented person in the world, but if they're not a cultural fit, being able to make those decisions quickly, and having some people don't have the heart to make decisions. I mean, I've historically had that issue, a decade ago or even 5 years ago, but you learn that you're better off making those decisions for both parties, right? The person that's affected by such a decision, or the rest of the team, because it can become very toxic very quickly.
I heard someone saying hire fast and fire faster. What do you
It
think?
wasn't me. Hire fast for sure. I would say it's very important to hire right. So again, I was in a conversation about outsourcing versus insourcing and so on. It was really, again, it was right sourcing was the response I gave. But talent is such a critical part of any business that I would say if there's any pain point that's the most difficult to rectify or to address, it's one related to people.
Yeah.
Processes are easy. Technology is the easiest thing ever.
And
right?
I think it's amplified when you're in a smaller company.
Yes.
Right? Because you have less people to hide and you can sense it more in an organization.
Yeah.
Right? For adaptation. Some people who start with you in the beginning have a hard time as you grow.
Yeah.
To
You
stay with
outgrow
you.
them.
You outgrow them, and you have to be okay with that. And it's not about you. It's about where you are in your company and who can work with you. We've had people who just loved the control and ownership at a small company, and as you grow to the double digits, they have a hard time letting go and sharing those responsibilities as they have to, and you can't have one single point of failure, right? So I think a lot of people may make you feel inadequate as a CEO, especially if you're a new CEO of an entrepreneur startup, to be able to understand that there are growth phases that you need to grow along with. And that's why I actually, after about 5 years of my company, joined Harvard University and took the Owners Presidents Management Program, OPM, to help look at my peers across the world, 41 countries, 160 of us, and be able to listen to others who had 3 generations of this process, or people who have been really growing as fast as we have in the last 5 years, and different industries, because I also think it's important not to focus only on your industry and be able to take lessons from other industries and bring it into your own tech side, and manufacturing can help you, Kaizen, Six Sigma from manufacturing, Toyota has helped us so much looking at what can we do internally from a people perspective, or looking at controls, something I never thought of, opening up the company and saying, what type of controls do I have to allow people in my company to have so much authority, but yet ensure it doesn't go off the rails, right? And that learning and education, although it's 3 weeks out of my year, probably more like 2 months from all the studying and the case studies, is so valuable to be able to get away from being the operator in a startup to being, again, the strategic advisor. Because you first start off as a operator, right? You do everything and anything. You do
You're the
PO.
you're HR,
Yes,
you're legal, you don't want to be legal.
Exactly.
But
how, if you really want to grow, how are you able to do it and walk away from the business and not feel like it feels really good to be the one person who's the rainmaker and doing everything, but it feels better to be able to let it go and say, I can walk away and come back and advise my team and they can run it on their own.
Yeah.
And you had some advice with regards to hiring people that you know, right?
Absolutely. It's so much easier to hire friends and people
Hey,
you know,
come
or
work for
people who
me.
recommend you, but it's not always the best.
Yeah.
It's hard to be friends, and I'm still struggling with it today. I'm not saying that I've figured out the solution, but I think as I look and get advice from others, really doing the talent search and taking the time to do that in 30% of your time in your job is looking for talent search and finding the right people is really important, as well as don't rush into partnerships. Don't rush into our pain was rushing into contracts in the beginning when we just needed to have those deals, when we needed to have that cash flow and revenue, and we cut around the corners and didn't worry about all the T's and C's. And then our partners went around us and went direct with our clients. And there was no ramifications. It's already hard enough to legally go after someone. and you want to believe people are ethical, but the more you can be cautious in the beginning, you will pay less for it later on when a big client of yours gets lost to a partner that is expecting to circumvent you.
Yeah.
So how do you protect yourself against that? Because it's difficult, especially in the early days, right? Because you need business, you take what you can. So is it a case of getting a good lawyer? Is it a case of checking the contracts more, or is it just a case of just being a bit more picky?
I think part of it is, if you do go around me, then I will have
I was about to sound like if you do.
I will have revenue ramifications on it.
Yeah, it will have an impact.
Right. I will have revenue ramifications around it, as well as if it's in the contract, your biggest clients will actually take it seriously.
Yeah.
It's not just your partner, but when you take this to the NASDAQ or you take it to PayPal or Tesla and you say, look, I know you want to work direct, but they signed a contract with us, especially law firms. They take it seriously that they're not being an enabler to breaking that. And honestly, the chasing people, putting them through court, we've never had to do that. It's not worth it. It looks good in language and in a contract, but it is there to protect you with your clients.
At the end of the day, it's also a brand, right? So a lot of people are in so much of a hurry, right, to close deals, to get some like initial clients, initial business, get a logo, right? What's the logo? What's your logo, right? And I hate the logo slide, like well, you know what? I refuse. I think they're so after that they're not being strategic and not necessarily understand the impact of going after the wrong thing, right? So again, take your time with partnerships. It's also be selective with your potential clients because it could make or break you, right? Especially if you're at the early stages of your company, you might think this like huge account is the best thing you can ever get. Like let's say you got a Facebook or a major telco or like the government, right? You might think that is the best possible thing for your business, but really you might be better off with 10, 15, 20 mid-sized companies and rally enough enough support and enough kind of buy-in from 20 people who are fairly credible than one company that could make or break you. Because once you lose a customer for whatever reason, experience or whatever, it's impossible to get them back, right? So this is basic kind of brand.
And companies have actually shut down because they have relied on one account. So we talked about this earlier where I said, wow, if a company got like one big account like Facebook, you'd absolutely make it. And both Hiba and Dow said, well, be careful of that because that one, if you rely over 50% of your revenue, if it's from that one account or all of your revenue, and you lose that one account, that is so dangerous, right? So I think I know businesses, like especially media companies, like if you look at digital media companies, they've actually shut down overnight because they've lost a Coca-Cola or an Emirates or something, right? And it is coming back down to look at your strategy of how you're building. Yeah. So I think this takes me into the next part, which is mentors, right? Mentors. And is it something that you recommend? What are your thoughts and what advice would you give?
Do you want to answer that one first?
Yeah, I think it's something we don't think about enough. And we need various different mentors from being a startup. Now I need a different mentor to say, how do I grow from double digits to triple digits in millions, right? That's a different mentor than I needed 4 years ago. And looking out for that person is easier, again, to the friend piece or the network piece to find someone in my network, but it's actually the people who are out of your network that are so much more valuable, that can look from the outside in and say, I don't understand why you're doing it this way. I understand these acronyms and I might not understand all of it, but a lot of it is basic business and logic. And it's important to have these various mentors as you go and not stay stagnant.
I think that's a good point for different stages of your business. Look at where you are, where do you want to go, and then look around for people that could advise, right? And Hiba, you
yeah, I mean, anyone who knows me knows how much I believe in mentorship. I mean, to the extent that I'm so happy to have been like re-nominated to the board, right, or re-added to the board of Speak Mentorship, and that's again completely different. But that's the power of mentorship across different generations, right? Cultural. this is about girls, about empowerment and teaching people how to, at a very young age, kind of have the right motivation and something to look up to, a role model. That serves two purposes. One is mentorship gives the entrepreneur a sense of, I'll say realism, right? A mentor, especially when unbiased, especially when coming from a different industry, who has nothing to do with your investment, who has nothing to do with your business, ideally understands the challenges you're facing. So you have to be selective with your mentors as well. And don't just choose your mentors because they're big names, or you have to really be able to connect with them, and they have to care. And if you don't find them, you have to move on to the next one and ask and seek recommendations. But I feel that it's important not just to have different mentors at different stages, but at the same time, you need different mentors for different purposes, different reasons, right? Sometimes you need mentors to help you resolve a talent issue in your organization where there's conflict internally with the team. Sometimes you need an external person to help you with your stage, your stage of growth, and how do you move into the next market, right? If you don't know anyone, so let's say you're in the UAE and you're trying to expand into the Saudi market, and you don't know enough about all the changes that are happening in Saudi and how things are so different, right? You need someone who has either worked there, has been successful there, is based from, that understands that. So that kind of mentorship is very different than me saying, you know what, I'm in a company that does AI type stuff, and I need people who can serve as advisors, who can be subject matter experts, but in the business of, scaling companies or whatever it is, right? So you have to be selective, but you have to also recognize the value of, especially mentorship, where it's very difficult to find the right people. It's kind of like a therapist, honestly, right? A really good therapist, or a really good doctor, or a really good, for people who like their barbers, right? And like hate moving because they're not going to find that same, corner store guy or whatever. Once you find them, people get comfortable as well.
You need those sponsors too, right? And a sponsor is different because a sponsor is actually bringing you into the new market, or taking care of you in a certain area,
Believes
right?
in you.
Right, believes in you, but opens the door.
Yeah.
And supports you, not just in the background giving you advice.
Yeah.
So, we've been lucky enough right now to be able to meet with someone who's in the federal government space. And we've never thought about entering the federal government space. But do you know the number of lacking women, minority-owned companies selling to the Pentagon or to the DoD and the government and the lucrative businesses? And we have this wonderful woman who's trying to put together a team of only women to go after $1 billion contract, right? And she's a VA vet. Phyllis Newhouse, want to say hi, love you to death. You have to have sponsors that are helping you as well, help you through.
That brings up a good point, though, right? I've been in the region, and I've worked in the U.S. There are many regulatory and other kind of governing policies and reforms that have happened over the years that incentivize certain behaviors or certain norms, certain things to succeed and to happen. And I believe some of the things, if this session is really about the learnings and what we can take from Silicon Valley or from the US, I'll say as a whole, and why that whole value system, ecosystem as it's called, in this case, of things that work and are driving change that are still in progress, right? If we were to talk about that specifically, I would say what Dow just talked about in terms of there is a specific percentage that of contracts, of federal work, of government work, and so on, that must go to small businesses.
And that's in the US.
That's in the U.S.
Yeah.
That must go to small businesses, right? Because again, the ecosystem is not one where the big guys rule and that's it. Because otherwise, we'd be stuck with only the Facebooks and the Googles and the big guys. And so, to support the small businesses, there's a percentage that's allocated to them, and then there's also, again, to support minorities and to support female business owners and entrepreneurs. And there's a lot of talk about is it for the sake of it, or is it when people are qualified, you should absolutely be able to have that kind of incentivization.
I think one of the things about the Arab region, I actually don't think we have enough women-led companies. Right? So if we were looking at that, we just don't have enough
The
women-led
pipeline
companies,
of,
right?
of
So
CEOs.
yeah, so if you have, you know, a handful, and then you've got and then, you know, the majority maybe men, then the government or the companies are going to be struggling to find. What I do like is the contracts going to small, medium companies, because I do think fueling that is important, and I think this is part of the whole accelerator partnership program. If you look at some of the big names like that have set up accelerators in Emirates Towers here. The whole point is to really bring in startups and get them to work closely and to identify some of the problems. So Greenhouse, for example, accelerator is from Shaloub Group, right? So they're in the retail sector, they're huge. So they put out some things that as challenges of businesses and have invited startups in from anywhere around the world.
Yeah.
So I think it's happening on a small level. I think I would like to see a bit more of a push, because I think that you can really grow the ecosystem here in the Middle East by some of the things that are working in the US, like making sure some of the percentage of contract go to small, medium
But I think
businesses.
what we're seeing in Silicon Valley even right now is just because you have these accelerators and you help people start their companies doesn't mean they're going to grow.
No.
What percentage of
succeed.
startups die?
Yeah.
And what we really need to be doing is trade.
Yeah.
Right? Helping each other with trade and businesses, as I think we're starting to do here, as proof that none of us knew each other
Yeah.
except
A few months ago. Yeah.
a few months ago, right? And how are we helping each other cross borders and giving each other businesses from a private sector perspective, or introducing each other to our existing clients, right? The best sponsorship you can do is take your business partners who are your and help them out.
You also have to be selective, though. So even with that,
Absolutely.
again, take your time, be selective, right? And yes, there's something that's clicked with some partnerships. Sometimes things kind of fall into place at times. I mean, we ended up in like 6 cities in like 6 months or 3 months by accident. So like it just so randomly happened. You know, and some maybe those are the signs, but. Don't be in a hurry to partner and to create those kind of relationships very quickly. Don't be in a hurry to scale. You need to actually prove that you have something that works. Again, it's hard to generalize so much, because there are product companies, there are services organizations. Most folks are going into startups with a product. One thing I will say that's very different between Silicon Valley and the Middle East is there are a number of issues. There's a lot of focus on seed investments, and that's great, right? To get people investor summit in Bahrain recently, and I mean there are some amazing ideas, but then there's also a limited understanding of what a successful company means or looks like, right? So there's investment that's being made without understanding how to perform due diligence, potentially, right? And some folks are good at doing that, and some folks are not, right? And taking a pile of 500 startups and saying, all right, these are the top 10, right? And we've had that at Harvard a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And it's actually quite interesting. Should we continue? Should we continue? Okay, because that's actually changed. So it's quite interesting how the process by which you potentially scale or rate a startup is not as structured here.
Yeah.
The funding is very different, right? So there are a whole bunch of
risk appetite is
Risk
different,
appetite.
right? So if you look at Silicon Valley is more of a mature market. You've had funding and startups and innovation for way longer than what we have here in the Middle East. And I think that there are some great ideas coming out of the region. There are some great startups that are coming out of the region. And you're right, that they start off and they get accelerators, but they can die and they will die if they don't get traction, right? And
smart
growth.
money.
Yeah,
smart money, expertise.
and we'll come on to that. But what I was trying to say was that, remember, as an entrepreneur, you can raise money from anywhere in the world, right? There's nothing to keep you here. What we want to do is make sure that the ecosystem and the startups really succeed from the region, right? So your ideas are here, but you can really springboard and find investment anywhere. So I think let's talk about, did you want to add to that?
I was
Hiba?
just going to say that is absolutely true. But the things I would like to see, so I am from here, right? From this region of the Middle East. And yes, I am an American and I have been in the United States for a very long time. But some of the things I would like to see is doing things not for the sake of saying we do them, right, but actually doing them, right? So how do we get to a point where there is funding here, there is an increased risk appetite, there is public-private cooperation, that there is, so the private sector is definitely not investing enough. What needs to start changing is that the private sector, as a former person in the Valley who led teams, one of the ways I kept my team excited and doing cool stuff is
Labs here in the private sector is like
and let's.
Okay.
I mean, I understand that everything has to be labeled, right? But the concept of an innovation lab, innovation is a mindset. It's a way of working, right? How do you make sure that 20% of somebody's job is to go and do kind of new stuff, think outside the box? What kind of goals are we setting every quarter for our teams to drive process improvement? Because innovation does not equal technology is the other part, right? I'm a technologist, and I'll tell you, innovation does not equal technology. Might be an enabler, it might be something that you use to drive innovation, but how do you think outside the box? How do you challenge the status quo? How do you say, the way we do consulting today, right, doesn't work anymore, right? How do we disrupt consulting?
And there's a difference from sustaining innovation, disruptive innovation.
Yeah.
And you really need to understand as a startup where you sit in that paradigm.
Yeah.
Because the way you approach the competitors, the incumbents, and what you do really affects your strategy.
Yeah.
No, thank you for that. And I think this leads us into smart money, right? So what are our thoughts on raising money, right? So if I look at when we were raising money in our first round, we raised from 2 family offices, right? And now we're on the verge of closing our second round. And it really is about, like, if you've got all these investors to choose from, which are the ones? So I know what smart money means to me, but let's hear your views, Hiba and Dao.
Do you want to take smart money?
Sure. So smart money is not just taking money where the investor is passive. Right? You're taking someone who has synergies, introductions that might be able to help you from a supply chain perspective, whatever is important to you. If you're Rent the Runway and you've got someone who owns dry cleaning before you ever built the largest dry cleaning facility ever, to ensure that you have that strong relationship from a partnership perspective, that's smart money, right? They can do more for you than just the dollars that are given to you.
I will say, even from an advice, if I was to draw a parallel for people who maybe are not startups or are not, VCs, or two-way street. It's not just that you're trying to get you getting out of, this potential match. It's a match both ways. So like this investment thing, right? You have to get your money or give your money or whatever, depending on the side of the table you're sitting at, where you, again, if you're not going to be passive, like what is this mutual benefit?
Yes,
what is the mutual? It's like a partnership, right? If we're going to partner, where's the win-win? If you're just doing it because you need money, right? Or an ROI, right? Again, it's like getting a job because you need cash. That is very quickly going to go away. Like that desire to work or that motivation or whatever it is. And if you guys don't click, right?
No, I think someone once described it to me as investment is like a marriage, right? You have to look at it over the number of years, not just a marriage. Yeah, but I think, smart money, that if you had a choice of 10 investors and they were all interested in you, evaluate where your values are aligned, where your belief systems are aligned, like if they are based in different parts of the world where you need access to, where they already have networks. That is an example of smart money. Having said that, you're very smart money, because you haven't actually needed to raise.
So if you want to scale more, I mean, obviously to some people our scale has been great, but I think for us to want to scale more.
Are you not in like the top 5 Fast 100?
Yes, but it's all relative. Every entrepreneur is never happy enough with their growth and their profitability, etc.
Yeah.
But in
risk
right?
averse.
And if we want to see more women grow fast, qualify to get to Harvard's OPM program.
Yeah.
Right?
Your program that you're in, you said there's 130.
There's 140 this last year, with 30 for us only had 12 women.
So it's improving.
It's improving, but it also goes up and down depending on the year, right?
So we need to aim for that, Hiba.
I think again, this is why, and you've heard my spiel about this. It starts at a much younger age, right? It starts when at grade 5, girls are being told math isn't cool or sexy or whatever it is that they're told that, education and like having that mindset change.
As her Myers-Briggs, and she's like, Mom, she just turned 13. Hi, Anne-Katrine. Medical field, and that's the type of things we need to be modeling for our children and showing them.
So speaking of that, I'll tell you this. I'll tell you that. We are in the Middle East, and I can tell you that I was told, or just culturally, I don't even have to talk about my own personal life. There's a typical, you're either going to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. Because those are the 3 most prestigious fields, and there's a level of, ooh, my son is, or my daughter is, a doctor. It is such a big, and people don't realize the amount of work we do compared to doctors, and the amount of money we make compared to doctors is actually pretty cool.
And that is cultural difference between Silicon Valley and many other countries, right?
Yeah.
You are seen cool if you're a VC or if you're a startup, and you go into Silicon Valley and they say, how many people are CEOs? 70% of the room.
Yeah.
How many of you have people reporting to you? Right? But on the other hand, it's really important to be able to see yourself as a CEO. 6 years, things that change that lasts a 5-year, 10-year period, not just today. And I think our parents, Asian parents, lawyer, doctor,
It's the same.
it's the same in a lot of places, but I think the culture here, it sounds like, needs to also encourage that and inspire that.
It's
right?
changing.
It's changing, and I think that here, if you look at what the government's initiatives are, what they want to do for the youth, and even the education system, there are, I do think, at least the UAE is going to be implementing more changes. There's talk
At a young age.
At a young
High
age,
school.
there's talk of like digital
Kindergarten.
schools and so
I
on.
want to see it in kindergarten.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
that's
gonna-
the stuff I'm pushing.
Yeah.
Is K through 12, things like Convention Worldwide, and things like Girl STEM Stars, right? Which is like 8 through, and it's just and it's no longer STEM education. Now it's STEM-E, right? STEM-E is STEM plus invention plus entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Because those types of, that's a mindset, that's a way of thinking.
And do they have that here now?
No, but we want to bring it here,
We
right?
will.
So, hi, Kuroba. We're working on it,
Yeah.
right? So, I think, again, what you touched on with Silicon Valley, like when you put hands up, who's a CEO, 70% of the room puts their hands up. That's where it starts, right? Taking the risk, right? Having that mindset. And if you look at innovation for the sake of innovation, is about doing something differently, right? It could be anything. It's about spotting something, doing something different, and then researching it, building a network of people, and then launching something that you believe in. Now, we're all in completely different areas, right? I'm product, you're both services, and even then you're in different things. But the one thing in common, I would say, between us 3 is that we're fearless. Right, we're fearless, as in, of course, there's things that are risky, there's decisions that we're making every single day, but it takes that kind of mindset, right, to kind of go out there and try. And then we all know people who have never moved outside of their town, right? We also know those.
I know people who have never left Brooklyn, New York. I mean, it's not only here, like this is everywhere.
Yeah, so don't be one of those people.
Don't be one of those people.
Let's talk.
we
There's
need
a
to-
question
there's a
here
question.
from Mohammed regarding talent hiring. I want to know from your experience what special, what do we need to check during the interview when we have only 15 minutes to decide? Okay, if I remember, if you have, what do you mean, that if you're evaluating people and you only have 15 minutes to decide, or which I'm guessing that you are, or as a candidate? Well, either way, I think this is one of the things that search is looking to disrupt, right? Because people want to hire faster and in more informative ways with less bias decisions. Normally, humans can take up to an hour to interview face-to-face and have all sorts of issues in that. So I think technology really can help with this. And Dow, you want to add to
I
that?
was going to say, you can do many things prior to the interview, like using products like predictive indexes, to be able to figure out roles and be able to really plan out what types of personalities do you need for that role
That's the big thing.
before you start interviewing, and have those be filters to figure out who you're actually interviewing with first. So a lot of it's taken out of the way before you have that interview.
So I'm in the business of talent, but from a different perspective than you are, right? So if I'm helping companies build teams, scale their companies, We have to be able to quickly identify talent. It starts with, again, what is the culture that you want to have, right? And then to have that culture, what kind of people do you need to have? And again, depending on the stage of your growth of the company, you need different kinds of people. So today, the people I need or the people you need are very different than if you were a, multi-billion-dollar organization. And then even understanding like, do I need a doer or do I need a leader that's going to build a team, right? So every decision like that. So, opportunity in my last role, we took the company from 200 to 3,000 plus people in a very short period of time. Where do you start? Do you start with the manager and then like let them build?
Where
the team?
did you start?
Oh, it all depends, right?
Share the learnings with everybody.
It all depends. It all depends. But ideally, you want to, and it's actually very different depending on the department, the role, and whether. But to the question, right? So Mohammed is asking, how do you identify, right? You have 15 minutes to decide. And again, I don't know that you have 15 minutes max, but
And why do you only have 15
yeah,
minutes?
I would say. That's why there's a multi-step process.
Yes.
I know that I stopped trusting at some point my sourcing team, right? Because I don't know what logic they're using to get me these top 10 guys or gals, or guys and gals. And so, can I see the other 60? And then I would sit there and say, well, why did you get rid of this person, right? From the pile, from the list. And try and understand that kind of human kind of filtering or screening or pre-screening. And I didn't necessarily agree with it because I tell so much just from the profile. And then my goal when we meet with people is to, and this is where you have behavioral interviews, right? Case type stuff. And then you have, your
Potential
skills.
interviews. Like looking and seeing what the potential of that person is to grow with you.
That's the
There
biggest.
are exams and tests for that allow you to have that. You might have a more qualified person for the current role today
In your company.
in your company or that you're interviewing, right? But do they have the potential to grow with you? And there is actually, we can post it later, there are actually resources where you can actually test people's potential for growth.
We track that. That's one of the things we track on Searchy is that not just the person for now, but as a leader, where do they sit? Are they a business execution? Are they people leader? Are they a visionary change? And out of that circle, they all sit in one of those. That will be the dominant style. And I think that is a really important. Companies do need to start looking at hires for not just now, but the people that are going to grow with them, right? And having these things
Or
in
help them
place,
grow.
help them grow, right? Because ultimately, you're not
They create
going to want someone to be in that role forever. You're going to want them to grow with you as an organisation. We didn't know each other when you were going through your scaling issues, but I'm sure hopefully we could have helped each other out. And during that time, I think having all those learnings, this is one thing that I would say about talent. There is always talent that wants to move to the Middle East. There is always talent that wants to move to the US. Within the US, you've got all the different cities, right? And it is a little bit about the world is a big place. And I think that's something that I want to remind everyone. Is when we were at Harvard recently, how many people asked us about what it's like to work in the Middle East?
They want to go back, though.
They want to
That's
come.
because they want to come back.
Yeah, and there's students, right, studying there, and they're like, what is it like to work in the Middle East? We're interested to come. We're interested to come. We heard that it's a good time. And it's about really circulating talent around the world to really find where do you want to be, which countries do you want to actually be in, and what can you offer.
One thing I know that came up quite a few times is we cannot continue to bundle all of these countries together into a single country because
not in the Arab region.
every Oman is
Even
different.
the States in the United States.
Yeah,
They're so different. Working in the Midwest is very different than working in the East Coast.
correct. And it's the same here. So Oman and Bahrain and UAE and Saudi and Jordan and Lebanon and I mean we keep bundling these 13 countries or the GCCs and all as one country, but even in the GCC, the culture is different, and what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. It's like saying that Japan and China and whatever are all the same, and no, it's not, right? They're not. Yes, we can call it, a certain region, but they're very different. So,
And there's something to say about standing out.
Yeah.
Right? When I went to work in London, I had the accent. right? And being able to talk to people and say, hey, I know I have an accent. I know nothing about your company. I know nothing about London, but would you go out to lunch with me and tell me everything? You're a blank slate,
Yeah.
and you stand out.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's nice to go and do, and it is good for you to do that.
And you're more. I lived in New York for a year, and what I found was I was operating.
More memorable.
Yeah, but I was operating in a different way, right? In terms of I didn't know anybody. I had to get out there and speak to people. And like you said, you are a blank slate. So your mindset is different, right? You don't have the comfort zone of your family and your friends and what you know. Everything is unknown. So you're forced to get out there, right? And build these relationships. And it all starts with people. And I think LinkedIn is doing a great job of, like we've talked a little bit about mentors and talent and how you grow and so on. LinkedIn is an absolute source for research, right? You even talked about researching the companies before you go for an interview. So don't forget what is at your fingertips, right? So no matter what country you're from, you have these resources available where you can really help yourselves to know more and operate a little bit more smartly, right?
Right, and you want to bring in diversity. So that's another thing I would say about talent.
Yeah.
You might not know what you really want without bringing diversity in to give you a view on what you need to be doing or could be doing. Yeah. Right? You don't want to be hiring the same people that are like you.
Clones.
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of companies make that mistake actually, and hiring managers tend to hire people that don't challenge them, that think like them, that will be yes sirs or yes ma'ams, and don't challenge, don't compete in the team, right? Don't have those different kind of very healthy behaviors that are required.
Harvey calls it creative friction.
Creative friction. Yeah, sure. Yes. Absolutely. And I know there's a follow-on question or a follow-on remark that came from Mohammed about what tips around finding the right behavior. I think Tyson in my last company used to ask questions about how someone organizes their inbox, right? Anything that will help you understand how someone thinks. Now, again, the challenge is if you only want to hire people that think exactly like you. So if you're looking for people who are going to respond to that in a very specific way, right? Because you're expecting the response to come back in a very specific way, then and you're basically dismissing anybody who thinks differently than you do or behaves differently than you do, that's not going to work either, right? You're not necessarily hiring kind of the best fit. So this is where human beings are biased. Like, it's just a known fact. You're going to end up hiring who you are easily able to talk with, speak with, or make eye contact with. And some people are horrible at interviews. Like, they're just so afraid. It's just like some people are so afraid of taking exams that they fail, but they're just really smart and talented. So the potential thing is really important. How do you really learn more about people to understand, what motivates them, what their strengths are, in terms of a strength, not what they're good at, but the strengths as in what gives them energy, what fuels them, right? Where does their passion lie? And that's where I spend the most of my time, is really understanding what motivates, what drives you, what makes what makes time pass, and that you want to focus on.
So we'll list a couple of tips and of places you can go to, but like even StrengthsFinder 2.0. To have people take that test ahead of time, we'll talk about their biggest strengths and not look at their weaknesses. Might be very helpful for you to qualify some of that.
Thank you for sharing that, Dow. And I think as an employer, we've defined behavior as one of the things that they can specify, right? And this is by role, not just by company. So company culture is one thing, but defining the behavior of the person, say it's sales or HR or finance. I love my finance manager. She's great. I don't need her to be innovative at all, right? I need her to be
innovation in finance is not necessarily
it doesn't
required.
Mix. And same with innovation and procurement doesn't mix, right? You want them to be conventional, right? And that's the sort of thinking style. So these are the sort of frameworks that at Searchie we're creating. And I think also what Dow has mentioned, she'll share some places that people can go as well. So thank you for that. And I think going back to the opportunities in the Middle East, right? My favorite topic. Until I got more and more out of this country, until actually even when I moved to this country, let's talk there first. I had my own misconceptions about what it was like to live and work in the Middle East, right? There were so many things that I didn't think you could do. When I lived and worked here, I started to break down my own misconceptions, and I was like, oh my god, like I can't believe I used to think this, and I'm really pleasantly surprised. And through that synergy, obviously broken through and created businesses here. So what I would say is I'm a living proof, and I think until I've moved and lived and worked in different countries, I feel like the more we get out of our physical countries and cities, the more we learn and the more we can bring back to apply to our businesses. So if I look at the Middle East, my advice would be to entrepreneurs and investors is get out of the region, see what else is going on, right? And what would you like to add to that?
You'll be surprised. I actually got feedback that one of the things I'm eager to do, as you know, is this concept of collaborative innovation, right? So with the internet today, getting out of the region is important because it's different when you immerse yourself, right, and feel it firsthand, right? Anybody says like, well, I lived in Paris for blah, 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 therefore I speak French, right? Like, maybe not French, it's harder, but I lived in, whatever, for a couple of years and now I speak Spanish. But immersion is very important and learning firsthand, right? So you've been coming to Silicon Valley, we're coming to the Middle East. There's something very important there in terms of learning, but learning comes in so many forms. But it starts at a much younger age than people are trying to do it today, right? There's a saying that says you can't teach an old dog new tricks, and yes, you can to an extent, but it's like even learning. Some of the most memorable CEOs that I will ever that I've come across are those who are constantly striving to learn new things and learn from everyone and anyone. Right? People assume you're only going to learn from those above you. I'm actually learning from kindergartnens. A whole bunch of just again, it's a way of thinking. So learning is important, but it starts at a very young age. Exposure is important, but because of the internet today, I was having a conversation this morning about how no one's going to museums anymore. Like no one's physically going to a museum anymore.
I know someone who's gone today.
Good. Are they there for an event?
No.
Because the whole like let's go and like look at art and learn, right? And read the little thing. People are now going online, and it's not the same, right? So that addresses the whole experience thing. But you don't have to go to a museum to learn from others and to learn how things progressed and to learn from others' mistakes and failures and so on. The internet and kind of knowledge online has made things available. The challenge with the internet is just because it's on Wikipedia doesn't mean it's true, right? Everybody believes everything that's on Instagram and on Facebook, and nobody challenges anymore. You just can hear something 10 times. It could be the same thing that's been spread 10 times. And then you assume it's real. So this is where the experiential kind of in-person thing is really important to get rid of those misconceptions. The other part of it is the last time I was in the region was 10 years ago. What it was 10 years ago and where it is today is completely different. Saudi 10 years ago, I was not able to get a visa to visit my team of 20 people, right? Today, no problem, right? So this is where things have changed. Things continue to change, and you can't assume that the way you left something is also how it is today. Silicon Valley isn't the same as when I joined it 10 years ago. So it's you have to keep up, right?
Sure. Dao, do you want to add something to that?
On opportunities in the Middle East. I think that it's from us as a reseller perspective, a lot of our manufacturers still have the old school of you need to be in the region to have relationships to sell in the region, right? And you have to have an office in that region to sell to that region. But in the cloud world and the internet world, why do I care if I have a physical space here to be able to sell if I have the relationships and the partnerships to do so?
The partnership world.
Right? And so I think we need to get the private sector to change some of those viewpoints as well in order to allow us, we started branching out to Norway and other countries, but we can do it from a services perspective, but much more difficult to do it from a reseller perspective because of the rules these manufacturers have.
Yeah. Sorry, so since we're talking about opportunities, we spoke about opportunities and the differences in like government and kind of like small business and so on. There are opportunities, obviously, and there's a lot of changes happening as it relates to policy and reform in general. So when we talk about open banking and all the, so I'm in Bahrain. I've set up operations in Bahrain, and all the changes that I'm seeing, in Bahrain around kind of policy change and the adoption of or the acceleration of
Within
kind of
fintech.
within
especially.
fintech especially. You know, it's actually quite impressive. The rate at which things are changing. Saudi Arabia is another one, right? In terms of the rate. Unfortunately, we're still looking at things one country at a time. And this is where, when you look at the EU, right, and we look at even the African Union that's being considered now, this quote unquote ecosystem is not going to change until we start looking cross-border, truly cross-border, and starting to actually resolve some of these issues, right? Every bank has an issue with KYC. Some of the things I'm working on right now is if it's working with, you know, hopefully the CBBs and the fintech bays and the different central banks and trying to say, hey, let's stop having one bank bring 10 startups to do a hackathon to fix that one bank's problem. Is how do we get all the banks to form a consortium? How do we get all of these organizations, right, the ADGMs and their equivalents in different parts of the world to come together and say, this problem is consistent. What needs to change, not only from a regulatory standpoint that works across the board. Again, now we get into geopolitical stuff, which I don't want to really drive and get into and discuss, but identity management is a big one, right? How do we make sure that everybody's passport with that chip, right? There are platforms out there that can do this, and we found them, but like, how do we make sure that we're looking at cross-border identity, cross-border talent, cross-border everything? And an opportunity for me is anything that is hindering us from making progress there is what I see as an opportunity for us to work on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think going back to your point of creating things that are borderless and also being based in one region, and you'll find it even in the US, no matter where you're based in the US, the world is your oyster. It's just about being strategic, I suppose, about what you go after. And I think in the Middle East, there is no better time to be here. I think there were some companies, even if we launched our business, right, even if it didn't have the AI part, if we launched it 8 years ago, digital was not a thing. It was not a thing here at all, hardly. No. So you almost have to wait for the right time. And I do truly believe that now is the right time because there are companies that are looking to make changes. There are companies that are looking to adopt. I think what they could do with is more outside solutions coming in with elevating the startups that are already here and kind of doing the private-public partnerships and things like that, and learnings, right? What has worked in the US may not always work here. Yeah. And I think that's what we're trying to talk about today, is there's some very good tips that have been shared. Take out of that what you will and apply it to your businesses to really stand out. And the Middle East is your springboard to Africa, it's your springboard to India, it's your springboard to really big areas around it.
And why not take, like for us, people we've helped do business with and create solutions in Silicon Valley, take what we learned with them on their failures and bring it here instead of just going for people you know around the Middle East and building a solution. Come to us and say, hey, what other if I'm building a fintech solution, what other fintech solutions have you helped with in Silicon Valley? So, we don't need to take over your consultancy firm here or take over your data centers here, but we can augment it and give you that dual strategy to make sure that you're ready to go out in the world as well.
There's something that I don't know that it bothers me, but it's something that has always been a theme has always been a theme in the Middle East, and that is that things have these cycles, right? Kind of like the hype cycles or whatever. Everything is always 5 to 8 years off.
Yeah.
Right. But that is a combination of risk aversion, waiting to make sure there's rarely kind of something that is initiating in this part, and I'd like to see that change. Second,
you're saying you'd like to see the Middle East be ahead and initiating
especially for things in the Middle East.
Got it.
I mean, honestly, as it relates to food delivery of fast food, that was the first place I've ever seen somebody deliver a burger. Like, it's pretty cool. Like, we didn't have that. We didn't have delivery from McDonald's. I saw that here before I saw that anywhere else.
And water.
Yeah. I did see it in Lebanon, right, where you make a phone call and the guy downstairs kind of brings you your hookah or whatever it is, right? But there are some things that happen here first. I would love to see a lot more kind of being driven out of here from an innovation. That's, again, the mindset. I want to be risk averse, right? Calculated risk, obviously. But I think the other part is is sorry.
Sorry,
They
you know
really
what
want to
I
talk to
did?
you.
No. You know what I did? I bought a new phone, iPhone 11, and it's on silent, but it's actually not on silent, obviously. So I'm really sorry about this, guys. So I think what we'll do. Sorry.
No worries. The train has left the station, unfortunately. so-
Yeah, I think your point is don't just look at Silicon Valley as an innovator.
Yes.
Step ahead of them and be an
Yes.
innovator yourself from the
Yeah.
uniqueness that
What
there is.
differentiates you?
Yes, from the uniqueness that there is here in the Arab world, and bring it to Silicon Valley.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think let's wrap it up with regards to the value of partnerships is really powerful. If you look at us three, like Dal mentioned earlier, we didn't know each other a few months ago, right? Business has brought us together, right? Hiba reached out to me. We met in Dubai. It just so happened then I was invited to speak at Innovate for Africa. We connected, right? So on that level of trust, we really clicked. And this is really where you then open more doors and vice versa. So, you were great in helping me in Silicon Valley and with what we're doing with Searchy and Elavoro partnering. And then likewise, when you're coming here, hopefully we can give you some insight into the region. And then even Dal, we were invited to speak at Harvard and she was there doing her course. So it was just the universe, right? And
It's
it's
funny
just
too is how I think I found you online as well.
You did, I think.
Yeah, see,
yeah, so it's powerful, people. So
LinkedIn is pretty powerful.
yeah. So
LinkedIn.
there's value there. It's real. It can happen. It can make a huge difference. And it's about the failures and success stories, right? And we need more women CEOs. So I hope today you had some good learnings. Any final comments, Hiba, that you want to wrap up with?
We need more CEOs. I would say women or otherwise. We need to, again, we spoke about mentorship. Please reach out, and if there's anything we can do to support that effort, let me know. I've heard about, hey, we should have podcasts, we should have like a mentorship, something or another, a platform. I'm getting ideas. Anybody that has ideas, I'm more than happy to kind of entertain and kind of review some of those thoughts of how do we improve collaboration. I know that from a CIO, CISO, CDO standpoint, Pulse, as a platform based in Silicon Valley, are doing an amazing job. Pulse Q&A, Mayank Mehta is the founder. That is a similar platform I think that we need for this. Don't go off and building it now. Hold on. We do need more collaboration, cross-border, cross-region. And I was talking about fads. I feel, sorry, my train has returned to the station.
Too late.
Too late?
Just
wrap it
up. Okay. But anyways, we are. It is much easier to talk to people and to get their direct feedback than you think, right? A lot of people are afraid or nervous. We're all just people, right? We saw this firsthand meeting celebrities. They're all just people. Some have made it big. Some have. Just stay humble as you grow, and be open to helping others.
Yeah. I think one thing we haven't touched on is social good.
Yeah.
And how we can, as entrepreneurs, have startups that can come back to the community more easily than trying to wait for the Fortune 500s to go back to our communities. So I think in mind, as you have a startup, how do you have social good go back and around you, and think about what type of innovations can you do that can help you make money, but help you make it decently.
Yeah, no, I think that's a lovely note to end on, right? It's in your hands. You have the power to change the world. And if we can create businesses, amazing businesses in the process, then absolutely that's the way to go. So I hope you found value in today's important topic with Silicon Valley and the Middle East. Sorry for the huge technical issues we had and the new iPhone rings and so on, disturbing. I hope you guys got something out of it. Thank you, Erica, for the comments as well. And as always, if anybody has any comments afterwards, feel free to add them. We will do our best to get back to you and then share some insights as well on some of these companies that you can go on and learn more about the behaviors and so on as well. Okay, thank you. Thank you for joining us today. Bye.